Ever had someone throw a rude comment your way and instantly feel your blood pressure spike? That moment when your brain screams, say something back, but you know if you react wrong, you'll regret it later. The truth is, handling disrespect without losing your cool is a skill, one that makes you look stronger, not weaker. Today, let's talk about how to respond in a way that keeps your dignity, protects your peace, and still gets your point across. Pausing before you speak is one of the most underrated skills when it comes to dealing with rude comments, because in that split second, you're giving yourself the gift of clarity instead of letting your emotions take over and run the conversation into a place you'll wish you hadn't gone later. That pause isn't about being weak or letting someone walk all over you. It's about reclaiming your control in a situation where someone is trying to take it from you. Think about it. When someone hits you with a snide remark or a sharp tone, your body's first instinct is to react fast. Maybe with sarcasm, maybe with a louder tone, maybe with words you'll replay in your head all night wishing you could take back. That's why slowing down, even if it's just 2 or 3 seconds, works like hitting a reset button for your brain. You let your mind catch up with your mouth, and suddenly you're the one deciding how this is going to go instead of just playing defense. In those few seconds of pause, you can see the bigger picture of what's happening instead of just the sting of the comment. You can ask yourself what's really worth saying here, or even if saying anything at all is the best move. It's like taking a mental step back from the fire instead of jumping straight into the flames. That space you create gives you the chance to speak from reason instead of reaction, and that's where the power is. People expect you to match their heat when they're rude. They expect you to bite back or crumble, and when you don't, you throw them off balance in a way that makes them rethink how they're coming at you. It's subtle, but it changes the entire tone of the exchange without you having to raise your voice or match their attitude. The pause also works because it communicates that you are not emotionally cornered. You're showing the other person that their words may be sharp, but they don't dictate your tempo. You're the one setting the pace here. Silence can feel uncomfortable in a heated moment, but that's what makes it powerful. It's a signal that you won't be pulled into a reaction you can't take back. And while you're silent, you can think of responses that are measured, clear, and firm instead of rushed and messy. You can adjust your body language, keep your posture calm, keep your eyes steady, and let your composure say what words don't have to. Sometimes in that pause, you might even realize the comment isn't worth engaging with at all. And that's where the real win happens. By waiting, you've given yourself the option to respond or not respond instead of being stuck with the damage from a reflexive answer. It's the difference between driving the car yourself or letting someone else grab the wheel and slam on the gas. That pause means you're still in the driver's seat, and that's exactly where you need to be if you want to keep control of the situation. The thing about rude comments is they're often designed to trigger you into showing your worst side because that's where you're easiest to manipulate. But when you take that beat, even just one breath, you send a clear message that you won't be baited into reacting on someone else's terms. You can decide to address the comment calmly, redirect the conversation, or simply acknowledge it and move on without giving it the satisfaction of your frustration. That pause is the difference between letting the moment own you and you owning the moment. Think about professional situations, arguments with loved ones, or even quick exchanges with strangers. This works everywhere. It's not about ignoring the issue or letting rudeness slide. It's about making sure that when you do respond, your words are intentional and not just emotional exhaust from feeling attacked. That space you give yourself before you speak is the very thing that keeps your cool intact while still letting you stand your ground. And the more you practice it, the more natural it feels to stop, breathe, and choose instead of just react. Over time, you'll notice that the pause doesn't just protect you in the heat of the moment, It changes how people see you. They start to realize you're not someone who can be easily rattled or provoked, and that alone changes how they speak to you in the future. Because people tend to respect those who can stay composed under pressure, and that respect is earned in those quiet, deliberate moments where you refuse to be rushed into saying something you don't mean. The pause is where your power lives, and every time you use it, you're strengthening that control over yourself and the conversation in ways that last far beyond that one rude comment. Separating the tone from the words takes a level of self-awareness most people never practice because it's natural to react to how something is said rather than what is actually being said. When someone delivers a message with a sharp edge, an eye roll, or that condescending tone that drips with judgment, it's easy to get caught up in the delivery and miss whether there's any truth or value buried inside it. The reality is, tone is often just emotion leaking out. It might be frustration, stress, or their own insecurity. And if you let that tone control your reaction, you've already handed them the power over your emotional state. But when you consciously decide to strip away the tone and just hear the words, you start processing information in a way that is clearer, calmer, and far less likely to make you snap back. It's a discipline that turns you into a better listener and a stronger communicator because it means you're responding to the message, not the mood it came wrapped in. This separation isn't always easy, especially when the tone feels like a personal attack. Our instincts tell us that if someone sounds aggressive or dismissive, then the content must be equally negative. But that's not always the case. Sometimes the words themselves are valid or even helpful, but the delivery is terrible because the person doesn't have the skills to express themselves respectfully. By filtering out the delivery, you give yourself the chance to evaluate the statement on its own merit. It's like editing a noisy audio clip. Once you take out the static, you can finally hear the actual message. This is a skill that pays off not just in confrontations, but in everyday communication, because you stop getting emotionally tangled in things that aren't really about you. The truth is, you can't control someone else's tone, but you can control how much you let it influence your interpretation of their words. People come with their own stressors, histories, and emotional baggage, and sometimes their tone has nothing to do with you at all. If you internalize every sharp tone as a personal offense, you're going to carry a lot of unnecessary weight. But if you treat tone as background noise, acknowledge it's there, but choose to focus on the actual words, you protect your peace and your objectivity. This doesn't mean you have to ignore disrespect entirely, but it does mean you deal with the content first before deciding how or if to address the delivery. There's also a psychological advantage here because when you don't take the bait on tone, you stop fueling the escalation. If someone is coming at you with heat, they're expecting you to match that heat. That's the pattern they're used to. One person gets loud, the other gets loud, and suddenly you're in a full-blown argument where nobody's hearing each other. But when you filter out the tone and respond calmly to the words, it disrupts that cycle. You end up pulling the energy out of the moment instead of adding to it, and that often makes the other person realize they're the only one creating tension. This approach also allows you to ask better questions, which can shift the conversation in a healthier direction. Instead of reacting to how they spoke, you can clarify what they meant, which puts the focus back on the actual topic instead of the emotional charge behind it. You might say something like, okay, so what I'm hearing is, and repeat the core message without the attitude they gave it. That not only shows you're listening, but also subtly invites them to restate their point in a calmer way. Over time, this creates a dynamic where people realize they can't get a rise out of you just by changing their tone, and they start communicating with you more directly. Another benefit of separating tone from words is that it helps you avoid making situations bigger than they need to be. If you react purely to the delivery, you risk escalating something that could have been solved in a single, calm exchange. But when you respond to the words, you keep the conversation anchored in facts instead of feelings. This is especially important in professional settings, where your ability to stay composed directly impacts how much trust and respect you earn from others. People remember how you handle pressure, And keeping the focus on the message instead of the mood shows maturity and control. Practicing this skill doesn't mean you're excusing bad behavior. It means you're choosing the order in which you address it. First, handle the actual content of what's being said so the problem gets solved, then decide if the tone needs to be addressed. Sometimes the tone will fix itself once the other person sees you're not reacting to it. Other times you might calmly point it out afterward when the heat has died down. Either way, by separating the tone from the words, you're giving yourself the best chance to respond in a way that's constructive instead of destructive. And that's how you keep your cool even when someone else is losing theirs. Using short, calm responses in the face of rudeness is one of the simplest yet most effective ways to hold your ground without adding fuel to the fire, because it keeps the interaction from spiraling into an emotional tug of war. When someone comes at you with a rude comment, they're often expecting one of two things. Either you fight back with equal or greater energy, or you shut down completely and let them have the upper hand. A short, calm response does neither. Instead, it sends the message that you heard what they said, you're not ignoring them, but you're also not stepping into the trap of escalation. Simple phrases like, "I hear you," or "that's interesting work," because they acknowledge the other person's words without endorsing or arguing with them, leaving no emotional hooks for them to grab onto. The less verbal space you give their rudeness to grow, the quicker it loses its momentum, and you get to stay in control of both your words and your emotions. This kind of response is especially powerful because it changes the rhythm of the exchange. Arguments have a tempo. One person gets heated, the other matches the energy, and the conversation snowballs from there. When you reply in a short, calm way, you break that rhythm completely. It's like dropping a rock in the middle of rushing water. It forces everything to slow down and shift around it. That pause you create gives you more control over where the conversation goes next, because instead of trying to outshout or outwit the other person, you've made them adjust to your pace. And when the pace is calm and concise, it's much harder for them to keep up their own intensity without it feeling out of place. Short responses also prevent you from over-explaining yourself in moments when emotions are running high. Over-explaining often happens when you feel defensive, but it usually gives the other person more openings to twist your words or find something else to criticize. By keeping your words few and steady, you avoid giving them unnecessary material to work with. You stay focused on the point, not the drama, and that's where your strength shows. Even if they keep trying to provoke you, your restraint shows them they won't be able to pull you into their level of chaos. Over time, people learn that trying to get a big reaction out of you is a waste of effort, which often leads to them approaching you with more respect in the future. The beauty of this tactic is that it's adaptable to almost any setting, professional, personal, even with strangers. In a workplace, it might be a simple "noted" when someone delivers criticism in a less than kind way, allowing you to acknowledge it without derailing the meeting or creating tension. In a personal relationship, it might be "I understand" when emotions are high, giving the other person space to cool off before a real discussion happens. Even in public or online interactions, a calm "all right" or "okay" can signal that you're not engaging in the argument they're trying to start. It's not about shutting people down, it's about keeping yourself from being pulled into an unproductive fight. Another reason short, calm responses work so well is because they leave room for observation. When you're not rushing to fill the air with your own words, you can better read the other person's body language, tone, and intentions. You might notice signs of their own stress or frustration that give you clues about what's really behind the comment. This awareness can help you choose whether to continue engaging, redirect the topic, or end the conversation entirely. It's much harder to notice these cues when you're locked in a back-and-forth exchange fueled by emotion, but a short, measured reply keeps you in that position of awareness and choice. There's also a subtle psychological power in refusing to mirror their energy. When someone is rude, they're often trying to provoke a certain reaction. They might want you flustered, angry, or defensive. But when you answer calmly and briefly, it creates a contrast they can't easily reconcile. It forces them to confront the fact that their rudeness isn't getting the result they wanted, and in many cases, they'll either tone themselves down or walk away. This isn't because you've won some kind of argument. It's because you've stayed firmly in your lane while letting their energy burn out on its own. That composure speaks louder than any long-winded defense could. In the end, short, calm responses are less about what you say and more about what you choose not to say. They're a deliberate decision to protect your emotional space, conserve your energy, and guide the conversation toward a place where it can actually be productive or at least less toxic. By keeping your words minimal but steady, you send a clear signal that you are not easily rattled, you are not here to fight, and you will not be dragged into a storm that you didn't create. Over time, this approach doesn't just help you manage individual moments of rudeness. It reshapes the way people interact with you because they come to understand that your calm is not a weakness, but a choice, and one they can't easily disrupt. Redirecting the conversation when someone makes a rude comment is a powerful way to keep the focus where it belongs, instead of letting the exchange spiral into a personal battle that serves no purpose. When you shift the topic away from the insult and back onto the real subject, you take control of the interaction without having to confront the rudeness head on in that moment. This is not about avoiding conflict, but about choosing a more strategic path where you decide what deserves attention and what doesn't. If you let the rude remark become the center of the conversation, you're giving it importance it doesn't deserve, and that's exactly what the other person wants. By redirecting, you're essentially saying without words that the comment doesn't carry enough weight to derail you, and you're steering the exchange back towards something that actually matters. That control keeps the conversation productive and protects your own energy from being drained by negativity. The beauty of redirection is that it takes away the oxygen that rudeness needs to grow. A rude comment only has power if you feed it with your reaction, whether that's anger, defensiveness, or sarcasm. When you respond by calmly shifting the discussion, you deny the other person that satisfaction. For example, if a colleague says something snide in a meeting, you could acknowledge the topic they mentioned, but guide it back to the work at hand, making it clear that you're here to solve problems, not play into personal digs. This approach subtly teaches people that if they want your attention, they'll have to bring something constructive to the table, because attempts to provoke you will simply be ignored in favor of moving forward. Redirecting also creates a mental boundary in the conversation. It's a way of saying, I decide where this goes, without having to directly declare it. This is especially helpful when the person you're dealing with thrives on drama or conflict, because it robs them of the momentum they need to escalate things. The more you practice steering discussions back to the point, the more natural it becomes to bypass the emotional hooks that others try to throw at you. You train yourself to recognize when a conversation is heading into unproductive territory and skillfully guide it back before it gets out of control. That ability is a mark of emotional intelligence, and it doesn't go unnoticed by the people around you. In personal relationships, redirection can be a way to prevent heated arguments from exploding unnecessarily. When someone you care about says something hurtful in the heat of the moment, choosing to focus on the core issue rather than the sting of their words can help you both stay grounded. Instead of firing back, you can acknowledge what's being discussed and move toward problem solving, which often lowers the emotional temperature for both sides. This isn't about letting harmful behavior slide, but about managing the moment in a way that keeps the conversation intact so it can be addressed more effectively later when emotions aren't running as high. In high stakes or public situations, redirecting can also protect your image and credibility. Responding directly to rudeness in front of an audience can sometimes make you seem reactive or defensive, even if you're justified. By redirecting, you demonstrate professionalism and poise, showing others that you can handle tension without losing sight of the bigger picture. This is the kind of composure that builds trust and respect over time, because it shows you're not easily thrown off course by someone else's poor behavior. It's a quiet but powerful way of communicating that your priorities are steady, even under pressure. Redirection doesn't have to be complicated or overly polished. It can be as simple as asking a relevant question, bringing up a detail about the current task, or shifting attention to a neutral topic that moves the conversation forward. The key is to make the transition smooth so it doesn't feel forced or defensive. This takes practice, but the more you use it, the more you'll find that people follow your lead when you change direction, especially if your tone remains calm and your focus stays firm. Over time, this shapes interactions so that rudeness becomes less frequent simply because it no longer achieves the desired effect. The real strength of redirecting is that it turns your focus away from the person's attempt to provoke you and toward what you can actually influence. You can't stop people from being rude, but you can decide what parts of their behavior get your attention. When you choose to steer the conversation rather than feed the conflict, you protect your peace, maintain control, and keep the interaction aligned with your own goals instead of theirs. That shift in focus is what keeps you from being dragged into the emotional chaos someone else is trying to create, and it leaves you standing in the position of control no matter how the other person chooses to act. Knowing when to walk away from a rude comment is one of the clearest demonstrations of self-control because it shows you understand that not every remark deserves your time, energy, or emotional investment. There's a natural urge to defend yourself, to prove someone wrong, or to deliver the perfect comeback that shuts them down. But in reality, those moments often leave you drained and unsatisfied. Walking away isn't about